Today's Cuckoo clock is one I picked up from a Goodwill auction in the US a couple of months ago, and it arrived a little while ago. It didn't take that amount of time to get here, but it's here now. That's the front of the clock. As you can see, it's got rather strange looking hands on it. I'm quite sure that they aren't original. We'll change those later on. And turn round, have a look at the back of the clock. It's a very old movement. You probably can't see at the moment until we take the movement out, but the count wheel has got pins on it, not slots. But we'll check that when we take that out. Both the bellows need new Tyvek paper on them. That's one of them. The other one's floating around inside the back of the case. So we'll fix them up before they go back in. That's the original pendulum. The back of the clock with the gong on it. That's the topper, and you can see it's got glass eye in the bird, so it means it's better than the normal quality because the cheaper versions don't have glass eyes in them. And these are the original weight, 1750 grams. You can tell they're original because they haven't got the weight stamped into them or cast into them as ones after the 1970s do. It's an 8-day movement, as you can see. You can easily see that by looking at the size of the links in the chain. Right, we're going to start to take this to pieces now. We'll start off by removing these very strange looking hands, and then we can get to the movement in the back of the case. I've got no idea where those hands came from. A couple of them there, and this one down here, complete with chunk cut out of it so that it will slide and hold, allegedly hold by friction on the cannon pipe. So I have a feeling they'll end up in the bin very quickly. Right, now we can turn the clock over, and I'll put the case on the top of this little wooden block I've got here, because the minute arbor is going to stick into the desk and we don't want that to happen. Alright, first thing we'll do is we'll remove these hooks here that are very, very tightly in. They've been pulled up very tight. We'll remove those so we can take the chains out. I'll turn that round a bit and get the other camera operating. Right, we'll take the hooks off that the weights hang on now. The chains have been pulled up as tight as they can, I imagine, in the showroom or in the auction room, so they didn't drag around to get caught on stuff. Problem is, it doesn't make it particularly easy to get at them to remove the hook. However, we've done it on that one. Hooks come off. We'll close the link up, but it's a pretty old chain. It might well break the link. We'll have a look and see. All right, now for the other one, which is going to be even harder. because it's actually inside the case. Where's the open piece? That one there, I think. I think that's the open side. Yep, it looks like it. Well, we're going to lose a link on this because that'll drop off, I would think. Once I take the hook off it, I'll wind that up and see if that'll come back just a tiny little bit. There we go, it's got him off. Now we'll undo this extremely perished rubber band. And find the other end of the chain, both of them. See if we can find the stop rings that they have on them, or whether they're there or not. There's one. Right, we'll remove that. That's the split there. Hold up with a pair of pliers. Another pair of pliers. Crack that split open. Take the link out. They'll need some work with the Dremel before they go back, that's for sure. Close that link up. That's the first one. And here's the next one. Alright, that's the open section on the top. Open it up with the second pair of pliers. Remove the stop link and wind it back again. Alright. Now I'll have to untangle these so that we can pull them through the movement and get them out. That's one. This one's a bit twisty-turny. Okay. See if the first one... No, it's caught in the movement. That one came out easy. Right, I'll put that aside. They can do with a bit of a serious clean up, I would say. They'll come up better than that. The other chain's caught in the movement. Probably where I opened the links up on it, I would think. Alright, well, put the case back on our stand so we don't dig the minute arbor into the bench. Now we're going to take out the bellow pipes. The original sign down here, it says this is an 8-day cuckoo clock. It has to be wound up every 8 days. So now you know. Alright, turn the case on its side and with a small screwdriver we'll take that screw out. It's coming out pretty easy, so we better be careful not to drop it. Put that aside, the case back down again, and how's our pipe? Still there, only just. We'll use a tiny little bit of pressure with a screwdriver to pull it off the brad that's holding it in place there. As usual, not easy to get at. There's not a lot of room to move inside these cases. But that should be pretty close. I'll use a larger blade screwdriver and we should get it. Yeah, it's still going. Oh, they didn't want that to come off in a hurry, that's for sure. being careful not to damage any, there we go, anything inside the case. So there's the pipe, complete with tattered paper on it. That's what's all that white powdery stuff in there. It's the top of that case. I've just blown down through the hole there in the top of the bellows, and the pipe is working correctly. It's always a good thing to do before you start repapering bellows, just in case that reed is out of whack and it doesn't work once you've finished. Alright, that's the high note. Now we'll do the same on the other side, and we'll take the low note out. Screwdriver into the screw once again. Turn it round. Screw comes out very easily. Once again, prise the pipe off very carefully. A larger screwdriver with a wider blade. You can now get that pipe out. We'll test it also to make sure it works. Yep, sounds more like a steam train, but that'll do nicely. Good-o. Put that aside. And we're going to lose this little piece of original paper here. I'll see if I can pull that off initially. It's actually glued on, all right. Because that will tear very, very easily. Put that aside. And there's our movement, or best part of it. Now what we're going to do now is get the top. These are the bellows out, which is still attached to its lift rod. Oop, turn that over. That's now up there, all right. Actually, I'll do this off camera, it'll be a bit easier. I'll start off by removing the other bellows top that fell off its pipe. Here we go. There's the other bellows top in the same condition as the previous one. They'll have new Tyvek paper on it before much longer. What we'll do now is we'll push these brads through and take them out of the side of the case, so they won't get caught on anything in there. Now push them through. That one's going to be a bit obnoxious. We can get a grip to get him started. I'll grab a pair of pliers with some teeth on it. See if that'll make a difference. Ta-da, ta-da. There we go. It is tight. That may have to come out. It's very tightly in there, that one. There we go. I think we've started him. Ooh, almost. Tiny bit more. I thought we might have to take it out once we got the movement out of the case, but no, that's all right. There we go. There's the second one. Now, look and see what we've got. We've got 4 screws down there. It's a bit dark and dingy in there, but we've got 4 screws. Turn that on its side and start removing the screws that hold the movement into the case. that out or not yet? Not quite. I think it is now. And the next one up the top here. I'll be interested to see who made this. It's a Regula. That case is probably a 34, but I haven't seen plates that look like that before. So we shall see. No, a bit hard to get out. All right, I'll take the movement out. I'll get those screws out. Right, the movement's loose now. I'll see if I can collect some of the screws. Always comes in handy. A telescopic magnet. You can get down into these things. It's the second one. Third one's fallen out into the case. And the fourth one's going to stay there. Right. Make sure the little bird, the tail of the little bird is down. If it's up, it's going to get caught in the case as we take the movement out. Found out what the problem was. I forgot to unhook the little bird from his door. That's why the movement wasn't coming out. So we'll have another go. Chains out of the road. Little bird's tail. All right. The case over there. There's our movement, suitably covered in broken down pieces of, I don't know if it's Tyvek paper, but whatever it is, it's certainly bellows paper. Could do with a very good clean. Not that we needed any, but if we need any more proof, yeah, that's that link that I opened. Obviously didn't close it quite enough, and that's why chain's caught. There we go. If we need any more proof that this is an 8-day movement, it's got 4 wheels in it, not 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I'll put that down there, and there's our little bird, of course. Is his mouth opening? Lovely. I'll mark that position on the perch in a moment so I know where to put it back. And there's our other screw. See if we can get it this time. Nope. Still being hard to get on with. There we go, it dropped out. I'll put that with the rest. That's all our case screws. And I'll now put the little bird there. He can just sit there for the moment. Actually, I'll put him up that way. It's probably neither way is safer. All right. I'll leave it very carefully for the moment. I'll pull the chain through the case. Put the chain over there with the other one. They'll both have to be clean. There's our case. There's the 4th screw down there. There it is. 4th case screw. Put it with the rest. And I'll pick up that old piece of bellows paper that's floating around there. Before we start to put the movement back together, I'll take this down to the workshop and fire up my air compressor. You can see there's heaps of dust on that, but there's lots of little bits and pieces of gunk down there. I'll blow all that out. I'll blow all that out before we put it back together again. The next step is looking at the movement to see if it's running properly or if there's any problems that we should take notice of before we take the movement apart. But before we do that, I'm going to give it a quick wash in some lighter fluid, just so that I can remove all these little bits of material that came from the bellows, the paper on the bellows, remove them from the clock so we can see exactly what we're doing. But before we do that, I'll remove the Pendulum Leader, which has got a bit of rust on it. We'll have to get into that with a Dremel tool, but using 2 pairs of pliers, we'll open up this part a bit wider. Both of these rings will have to be opened. First one. Second one. Now we can drop that out. Out it comes. And twist over the Pendulum Leader, and it slides out of the crutch. This bit there. Right, we'll put that aside. Now we'll get some lighter fluid and we'll give this movement a quick rinse. I've removed the little bird from the movement and you can see it's pretty dirty. So I'll give that a clean. Let it soak for a moment in the lighter fluid, and then I'll wipe it down with a Q-tip. In the meantime, I'll get some acid-free paper, put it on the desk here so that we can put the cleaner parts on it. Alright, grab our little bird. And start rubbing over it. Oop, comes straight off. With a Q-tip. And get rid of a few years worth of dirt and grime that have built up on it. Careful of that little wire. That's the one that opens and closes the door when the cuckoo pops out. A little bit more down there. And that's looking substantially better. I'll get a cloth and clean that now. Wipe it down. Being a bit careful. Using lighter fluid, you don't run the risk of smudging any of the paint or anything else that's on the bird. That might happen if you use kerosene or other hydrocarbon products. That's looking a lot cleaner. Alright, we'll put him aside down there on the acid-free paper. Now I'll put the movement into our tray. And I'll pour some lighter fluid over the top of it, making sure that we cover it all. I'll take it out and turn it round. Careful of the hammer, so that we can give the front a bit of a wash down. I think that's got a fair bit of it off. I'll grab a Q-tip, have a quick wipe over on some of it and see if we get any dirt on the Q-tip. Well, that's looking alright. Though I think we might have solved the problem with that. Take it out of the lighter fluid. Give it a couple of shakes. Put it on our acid-free paper. Stand there for a moment. I'll go and get a heat gun and we'll dry off the last little bit of lighter fluid that's still on the movement. Right, we've got our heat gun set up. We'll put it on low. And run over the movement, front and the back. just to dry off any residual lighter fluid that's still on it. That's it, that's all it takes. Once we've taken the movement to pieces, we'll put it through the ultrasonic cleaner, then it'll come out nice and clean. Then we can start checking for bushing wear, if anything needs to be done, and making sure that the movement is functioning correctly. That's looking a bit cleaner. Little bit of Dremel work needed here and there with some rust. Right, we'll have a look and make sure all this is working and see if there's any problems we need to look at once we get it to pieces. Spin the great wheels round. That's the hammer lift wheel down there. Regular 34 movement, sold by the Welby Corporation in America. An 8-day movement, as I've mentioned before. Well, that all seems to be in relatively good functioning order. Escape wheels turning. Right, we'll start to take that to pieces now. We're going to take the movement to pieces now so we can put it into the ultrasonic cleaner and get it cleaned up a bit. It's looking pretty rough, as you can see. Powder and residue and stuff everywhere. First thing we'll do is we'll take off this Pendulum Leader suspension rod we've got here. We'll get rid of that. We've noticed that the low node Cuckoo lever down here is caught in behind the count wheel, so we can't take that off. We'll have to wait until we take the plates apart. So yeah, they're all right. I'll see if I can. That's not going to be easy to get at, actually. There's heaps of stuff on it. Right, I might take that off when we get on the inside. Gee, they need a bit of a clean. Wow, fair enough. Right, we'll grab our trusty spanner. We'll start loosening these nuts off on the pillars. Take them off. Then we can remove the back plate. And number 4. Okay, now start lifting, gently lifting the back plate up. Hopefully we'll be able to keep all the wheels in their correct positions. Whoop, other than the great wheels falling out. And we've got it's a crutch that's holding us up at the moment. We'll take that out. There's the movement, I'll put that aside. That's a back plate made in Germany. Welby Corporation. As you can see, in serious need of a very good cleaning. Look at the oxidation build up on that, on every one of those holes in there. There's no bushings in them, so they're just holes that have been drilled or punched into the plate. Right, we'll take this apart while we've got it in our hands here. Okay, that's notes caught on there. They've got it turned round. Okay, turned round, we'll pull the high note lift lever out, and that is going to require some serious Dremel work. You can see how much oxidization is on that, just scraping it with a pair of tweezers. Alright, now the low note, we can now turn that round. That'll now come out. It's in the same condition. And the hammer lever has got a very fine spring wire that ties off in that hole there. So we'll pull that through. Yep, they've actually looped that over and underneath. Okay, there we go. That's undone it. Pull that up. And then the hammer lever will come out. Wow, serious Dremel work required there. And now I'll have a look at the count wheel, undo this screw, and hope we can get it. Oh, yeah, that's not too bad. That comes off. Look at the oxidization on that. Alright, there's the plate. Patent applied for, etc. All that sort of stuff. They seriously need a very good clean. And that amount of oxidization built up there is guaranteed to have added an awesome amount of friction to the movement. Alright, put that aside. Right, let's start taking the movement to pieces so we can put it into the ultrasonic cleaner and get it cleaned up. They're the great wheels. Seem to be functioning all right. Now, that lever, I'll put that aside over there. We've got the pallets here. Will they come out? Yes, they will. Tiny little pallets there. Could do with a good clean. Good grief, look at the rubbish on that. We'll go over all those with the Dremel and bring them back. I'll start taking the wheels out now. Actually, I'll take that guy off. Has that got a... Alright, put that aside. Now, second wheel on the time side. First wheel. Seems to be alright. Then the escape wheel. Obviously at the top of the train. Wow, we've got some work to do to clean those beasts up, that's for sure. Yeah, they're all in serious need. My motion work's not coming out alright. We'll get warning wheel. You can tell because it's got a pin on it there. Fly right at the top of the train. Now we can have a look and see what we've got here. Now, the rack stop lever, which we were looking at before, and we took a tapered pin out of there. It looks as though we'll have to undo this little screw here so we can get it out of the plate. Well, it's a bit tight, but anyway, we got him. Slide that off. Now we can slide out the rack stop lever. Well, in theory we can. We can get a little bit of a start up here with it, with all the crap that it's got in there around it. It should. Oh, there we go. Another one off. Pop that back on there for a moment so I know where that comes from. Let's see what else we've got. Little bird perch, complete with a spring there. Right, now we'll remove the little bird perch. We've got there was those wires set into it, so looks like we'll have to undo these screws. Like everything else, they're pretty seriously in here. All the oxidization and crap on them, I can't even turn that round. Right, I'll go up to a larger screwdriver. I think this one, that's going to be too big. We'll grab another one and see whether we have any more luck with this. This is actually the correct size for this screw. Yep, that's got him. I'll loosen that off, leave it for a moment, up to the top one. Cracked him. Alright. Now we can use a little guy. Got a washer underneath, so we'll be careful not to lose that. Back to the top again. And same thing, unwind him, and that spring is wound round that post there. So we'll undo that, couple of twists around there. Tweezers might give us a go. Alright, that's got him off. Oh, there's a little bird's perch. Not in too bad a shape. Bit of rust down there we'll clean up. Well, we will be able to get that bit of brass off so we can clean that, the ultrasonic. And we're getting relatively down to the bottom. Right, now if I can get my pliers, we'll remove this taper pin here. It might, gee, it is tight. That's got him. Take it out. They'll all be replaced. We'll throw them out in a moment. We'll take this lever off. Everything's suffering from serious oxidization and gunk on everything. All right. Well, that's as clean as that's going to get for the moment till we put in the ultrasonic. I'll get that sorted now, and then once that's been through, we'll then have a look and see how clean things have come up. The movement parts have all come back from the ultrasonic cleaner, and as you can see, they're seriously cleaner than they were when they went in. One plate, that's the other one. Most of that oxidization is gone. There's still some little marks on the individual pivots on the wheels that there could do with a bit of a clean up, but the wheels themselves don't look too bad. However, we're going to have to peg out both the plates, make sure the holes in them are clean, and some of the pivots on some of the wheels are going to need a run over with some fine steel wool, and also we'll run over the pinions with some pegwood because there's some gunk in there that needs to be removed. So we'll do that before we move on to the next step. We'll start off with this plate. I've sharpened a piece of pegwood, nice sharp point on it. We'll go over every hole in the plate that has a pivot or a piece that runs through it, and run some pegwood. It's pretty clean actually. Into every hole and get them all cleaned out before we start to put the movement back together again. And that one there. They've come up pretty well actually. There's virtually nothing on the pegwood. Couple more here. And that guy there. Spin around. I think that they're a bit bigger. That's where the hammer lever goes. The low note lift lever for the bellows, and that's a high note lever. Goes in there. We'll spin the plate over. It's pretty clean. Right, we'll run over the other side. Make sure everything is clean. The ultrasonic cleaner has certainly done a really good job. These plates are excellent compared to what condition they went in. Alright, we're just working our way along. Checking every one of the holes in the plate. And that one. And that one. And I think we got one more to go there. And we'll turn it round. We'll run in the other side where the hammer goes, and the high and low note lift levers. Right, well that looks pretty good actually. I'll run over this other plate off camera, and then we'll come back and start cleaning up some of the pivots. Well, I'll finish the second plate, so we'll remove some of the discoloration on this wheel here with some very fine steel wool. Won't take much to remove it. And that looks a lot better. How are we going on the other side? Yeah, that looks alright. I'll just check that piece. Nope, alright, that looks good. Now the escape wheel has got a little bit of discoloration up here, so we'll run over the arbor and the pivot with our steel wool. That's looking better. And then we'll run our pegwood into the pinion at the back. Little bit of rust in there, but that's really hard to get out. A Dremel won't catch that. That won't go deep enough. But we're removing a reasonable amount of it. With the pegwood, you can see it's getting discoloured on the end. Yep, that's looking better. Down to the second wheel, have a look and see. We'll do the same thing with the arbor and the pivot. Hold it tightly in some very fine steel wool and spin the wheel round. Yep, heaps better. Now we've got some rust. Actually, I'll run over the arbor here first. Clean that up a bit, which it has. And then run over the pinion with some pegwood. Got a bit of rust in there, but just a little bit. Look at the first wheel, see what we've got. Same story, and I think it will be for pretty much every wheel we've got here, though the fine steel wool is doing a sterling job on it, cleaning it up. Check the pinion. It's not in too bad a condition actually. Pivot on the other side. Hold the steel wool, spin the wheel round. We've got a little bit of discoloration on that wheel there, so I'll run over that a little bit, and everything is gradually getting cleaner. That's looking better. Minute wheel. And that looks like it's got a pretty clean pinion on it. Little bit of stuff in there, but there's no rust, which is unusual. Most of the rest have. Yep, not too bad. Now what else have we got? Warning wheel. Little bit of rust on the arbor. Got to be careful not to knock the pin on that. Spin it round. Comes up rather nicely. Also, we've got a little bit of rust on the other side of the arbor, though that's not going to be easier to get off. We've got to be very careful of that pin there. Looking better. And a little bit of rust in the pinion. I've got a brass wire brush somewhere. I should have. I can't see it at the moment, but I'll have a look and see if I can find that, because if so, that'll be very handy to get in between those leaves there. But the movement's coming up pretty well actually. Alright, we'll put the strike side wheels in now and check them. Make sure the pivots are right. And check for end play. Actually, we'll put this wheel in first. It'll be easier because it goes in under the pulley wheel there, the great wheel. Sits there. S2 goes there. That's got him. And S3, the fly, goes there. Well, it doesn't go down that hole in the plate. It goes there. Right, so there's our train down there. Now I'll put the top plate on. Align the posts with the holes in the top plate. That's looking better. Alright, it's got that. I'll put a nut on this post over here, lightly, just to hold it so the plate doesn't lift. I'll do the same this end up here, because they've fallen into place, we might as well take advantage of it. Now back to the side we're working on. And the bottom of the plate. Right, I'll put a nut on that. Well, that should hold the plate sufficient for us to have a look and see what's happening. Alright. Great wheels are right. S1, that wheel there. S2, we've got to put the pivot in, which is pretty close to there, I reckon. Okay, S2 goes almost there, but not quite. Actually, I'll put the fly in. Flies tend to have a slightly longer pivot on them. So you might have to put the fly in first before you finish putting your wheels lower down the train. Alright, we've got that for the moment. Let's see what we've got. They're all in properly, spinning nicely in the train. Alright. Tighten those nuts up just a tiny bit. Give us a more accurate assessment of what's happening. Alright, they're done. Now, we'll look at these one at a time. Great wheel. Yeah, got end play, alright. S1. Moving backwards and forwards. That one's alright. S2. The warning wheel with the pin on it there and the maintenance cam on it there. S3. S1 looking alright. S2 with the pin on it there and the maintenance cam on the other side. Turning around, you can see there. S3, the warning wheel, there's its pin. And S4 being the fly, that tiny little guy up there. They're all moving backwards and forwards. They've all got end play in them. Moving pretty freely. Now I'll flick the pivots backwards and forwards and see what we can see. It's not looking too bad. The fly. Now they don't look too bad actually. I'll turn over, look at the other side. Alright. It's not often that you have to do any rebushing in a Cuckoo clock, and this seems to be following that pattern. Alright, well that's alright. That's a strike train. I'll take the top plate off and then we'll have a look at the time train. Alright, I'll remove the strike side train and the top plate's gone. Now we'll put in the time train. Before I put in the great wheel, I'll put the first wheel in, which goes there. And the great wheel sits on top of that. A lot easier to get it in that way. And the second wheel, pinion down, because it's driven by that wheel there. Then the escape wheel, pinion up, top plate on. We'll check out the bushings and the wheels for end play. The wheels for end play, bushings don't have end play, but we'll check out the pivots and see how they align, and then we'll check the end play. That's one. I'll put a nut up there. I think it's, yep, half a turnal. Well, it's probably all we'll get on that. That'll do it for the moment. Right, now we can start to look and see. Wait a minute, we may actually be able to get we can get a nut on that post there, the bottom of the plate. Right, that'll hold things more securely for us. Now we can start to see what we've got happening. That's okay. Alright, first wheel goes there. That's got him. That was a serious click in, but I think it was that pillar there. Second wheel, just about in. Tighten that down a little bit. And the escape wheel, which goes over to there. That certainly sounded like it dropped in. Right, put a nut on that pillar, wind it down a little bit, have a look and see what we've got. Yep, everything's in place in the correct orientation. I'll tighten these nuts down just a little bit so we get a true reading on what's happening. If you don't tighten them down a bit to where they normally are, then you'll get a false reading on end play. Alright, let's see what we got. This one, the first wheel, pretty tight. End play, no shortage of end play there. T2, plenty of end play in that one too. And S3, the escape wheel. Just check the pivot. Now they look pretty good. It's not often that you have to replace or actually put bushings into a cuckoo clock movement, and we don't have to today. No, they look alright. But there we go, you can see them spinning nice and freely. Alright, so next step is put the movement together. We're ready to start cleaning some parts now. We'll do the chains first, but after that we'll do the lip levers. You can see the oxidization on them there. We'll run over those with some steel wool, and any of them that are pretty seriously dirty, we'll put the Dremel on them. But we'll start off with the chains. First one, a nice big chain. It's an 8-day movement, a Regula 34. So how we'll clean the chains, I'll find the end of it, then we're going to pull it through a scourer pad, and that'll remove heaps of the corrosion on the outside of the chain. So we hold the scourer pad relatively tightly together, and then pull the chain through it slowly, and we'll find that heaps of that oxidization has been removed. Got a kink in it there. That's the first time through. We'll do it again. Usually 2 or 3 times is what it takes to clean a chain up. Holding the scourer pad relatively firmly again, we'll pull the chain out through it. Doesn't look too bad. Now, close up, see what we've got. It's looking a bit better. Still got the dark patina on it. But you can see it's a lot cleaner than this one that hasn't gone through yet. The rust, etc., that's come off, it's on the gloves there. that's looking a lot better than it was. We don't want to clean it up 100%. That's quite sufficient. Because if we go any further and bring the brass out more, then we'll lose all the patina on the chains. We don't want the chains to look brand new. We want them to reflect the age of the clock. Take some of these parts out here and we'll check them out. The movement's been through the ultrasonic cleaner, it's come up pretty well. So now we're going to look at the levers, lift levers and otherwise. This is a pendulum hanger. We'll start off with that. You can see the rust on it. We'll use 4/0, which is the lightest grade of steel wool. We don't want to scratch the bluing on it. Hold it in our finger, turn it round. Little bit of rust on the thread down there. And then backwards and forwards on this end. Clean it up. It doesn't require a Dremel, it's not too bad. And down that end. See, that's looking a lot better. Now what do we got here? That's blued, that's looking alright. Little bit of oxidization there, we'll remove that. And at the base there, and we'll run over this post here, get that cleaned up. It's looking a lot better. And that little brass nut there could do with a little bit of a shine up, I would recommend. That's looking better. Got the oxidization off there. What's the next one? What do we got? It's looking a bit rough. It's rather rusty actually. I'll give that a... Seems to have done the job, got rid of it. Thought we might have to go up to heavier grade steel wool, but this 4/0 seems to be doing pretty well. Run over that piece there. It's only light rust on these parts. They don't require a lot of cleaning, but while we've got the movement apart, we'll get in and clean them. And a little bit on there. Now, we won't see any of these parts that I've cleaned because they'll be in the movement inside the case. But that's no reason just to throw them in again and leave them dirty. We'll clean them up because we'll know that they haven't been cleaned even if no one else does. And a little bit on there. Not taking very much actually. You can see that sort of coming up better. And on this little bit of the arbor out here. Yep, certainly looking better. No, this is not in too bad a shape actually. Little bit of rust down there, we'll remove that. Rack stop lever, and I'll take this piece off here that I tightened down, so I knew that it went back on that pillar there. I'll put that back on in a moment, but in the meantime we'll run over this post and remove the rust on it, and oxidization on that piece of brass there, and same on the front. A little bit of rust there, I'll remove that. And this piece here requires a little bit of attention, not much, just a little bit. And on that brass piece there, I'll put that back on there, tighten it down together so we know where that comes from. Little bit on the rack, not much. Little bit of oxidization, we'll run over that. That's removing it all right. Good thing I put a piece of paper down to catch all the filings that are coming off the steel wall. Well, they'll all be falling through the top of my bench here. Now, crutch is looking a bit rough, so we'll remove the rust off the top of that. You can see it's pretty rusty up there. That's a shiny bit I've just done. There's that piece up there. So we'll run in under there. It's not easy to get at actually. I don't want to damage that pivot on the end. So I'll have to be pretty careful with that. Almost ready for a new bit of steel wool, I think. Just holding up. We'll change that soon. Right, see what else we've got. On the lift levers, you can see the oxidization on there. We'll run over that. Won't take much because it's not very thick. And up along here. These lift levers aren't so easy to clean because I've got these couple of pins on them here that work on the star wheel. That's that piece there. Alright, what have we got here? Hammer's not too bad. Little bit of spring wire there, we'll have to replace that. That's not going to last very long. So clean up the arbor. And that spring wire, we see which way that goes. Starts there to there. Right, I'll leave that broken piece on there. That'll give us a clue as to which direction it's going to have to be rebuilt. That the other lift lever, quick run over that. Luckily all these parts are in not bad a condition. The little bit of rust on them is only very, very light, and or oxidation, so they don't require lots of cleaning. And the little bird's perch, actually that looks alright. Sounds like the little bird's got something to say about that. Right, there we go. Pendulum Leader could do with a bit of a clean. We'll run over that with a medium piece of steel wool. It's looking a lot dirtier than, rustier than before. And I think the rust will be stuck on it pretty well. Being careful not to bend it out of shape. These strange angles aren't easy to clean actually, but we're getting there. Okay, that looks better. Pop that back in there with the little bird. Oh, we haven't run over the hooks and the stop rings yet. I'll just check one and see whether we can get away with steel wool or whether we've got to put it on the Dremel. Nope, it's got to go onto the Dremel. Alright, I'll get that set up and we'll come back. The easiest way to hold these parts is in a set of lockjaw pliers when you're using a Dremel. Holds them securely and it doesn't cut the end off your gloves. Alright, Dremel's warmed up. Using our wire brush, we'll run over the top. Down along the side. Turn it over. Same on the other side. These little wire brushes last a reasonable amount of time. They're not doing a lot of work actually. Now we can do the hook. Turn him over. Do the other side. Run along the edge. That's looking not too bad. Right, I'll do the rest of those off camera and then we'll be back. Loosen off the two nuts at the top on their pillars so that we can fit the pallets and the crutch in. It slides in there and goes into that hole there. I'll have to loosen the nuts a little bit more because I'm going to have to bring this top plate up sufficiently to get that pivot there inside that hole without doing any damage to it. So we might have to start putting some of these wheels back in again in a moment. I'll loosen the other 2 nuts down the bottom, give us a little bit more room for movement. Now lift the top plate up sufficiently to get that pivot in under there. Just about. There we go, we've lifted it up, everything else has fallen out, so it doesn't matter. We had them right before, so if we can do it once, we can do it again. And now, yep, that'll hold. Put them there. Too early to put any nuts on the top, so we'll dive back in here again and see what we got. Okay, first wheel, time side, that is pretty close, yeah, alright. Escape wheel, second wheel, and still a little bit loose there. I think these are relatively okay. Scope wheel, there we go. Right, I'll put a nut on the top of that. Couple of turns, that's all we need just to hold it. Check the wheels. They all seem to be in okay. Okay, now over the other side. First wheel. Second wheel. Pallets now. Yeah, pallets are in, good-o. Second wheel. Third wheel, the warning wheel. And the fly, which we'll do up that way. Yep, they look alright. Nut back on the top. Not tightened down yet. Check them and see. Turn around, do it that way. Time side working okay. We'll get a close up on the escape wheel. Alright, we'll tighten the nuts down now for the moment. Then we'll investigate and see what else we've got to put on. The escape wheel's turning. Right. Well, we're getting sorted. Put that there for the moment. Now, what else have we got? Actually, what we'll do is we'll put some of the levers on, I think, if I can find them after I cleaned them the other day. There we are. 2 bellows lift levers. Our count wheel is going to go there, which we'll tie down later on. Now the hammer. And we've actually got a broken spring on that. I'll change that spring before we put that in. By putting the count wheel back on again. and tighten it down on its post. Now we'll get a bit of wire and we'll make a new spring for the hammer. You can see this one's broken. That's part of it there. And it's snapped, and this part is loose, which I've just taken off, that little bit there. So we'll make another one. This is the hammer wire that we're going to look at. It's a spring wire. You can see it's very light gauge. It's actually 0.25 of a mil. It's the wrong size. It wouldn't be factory. Someone else has changed that, and I'll explain why. If you have a look, the spring starts off wound around the hammer there to secure it. And then there's 6 coils wound round the arbor there. And then the spring continued around there. And then there was another 4 coils round there. Now the reason there was so many coils on there was because this wire is not strong enough to do its job. It's probably all the guy had in stock, so he used it and put extra coils on it. The size wire we use for springs is 28 gauge, which is that there, 28 gauge brass wire. It's 0.32 mil in diameter, measured with a micrometer or with a vernier. We never use more than 4 or a maximum 5 coils on an arbor because it makes it too strong and works against the principle of the hammer or whatever tool you're trying to provide a little bit of positive pressure for. So we'll take off this old spring initially. It's pretty ratty, it's falling to pieces anyway, so off it comes. Then the last little bit, put those in the bin. There's the pieces there. Okay, so I'll cut a piece of our 28 gauge wire. We'll see how much we need once we get to the end of it, but at the moment we'll cut off more than we need. Not excessively, but we'll cut off a bit more than we need. We'll cut it there, and we'll start winding the wire four times around the hammer lever there. I'll flick the end up and we'll cut that off with a pair of cutters like so, and then push the end down so that it's nice and flat and doesn't catch on anything. Right, so we slide the wire up underneath the arbor. Now we want 1, keeping them tight, 2, 3, 4 coils, you can see there, and then we'll drop the last little piece of the wire down under that lever there and bend it round, and make sure that that's sufficient, because that piece there has to be hung on the side of one of the plates. So I'll undo that now. It's got a bend in it, and we'll put the hammer into the movement. You'll see people online with a drill or a nail or something like so, and holding a piece of wire there, turning the drill on and getting a lovely little nice neat tube of wire. The only problem is you can't use that in a clock because it always has to be wound round an arbor, and there's wheels and pivots, and posts and stuff coming out, and you can't just slide it on. So they've all got to be done in situ. Right, now we'll just check to make sure that we've got sufficient wire there. It looks a little bit short to me, but I'll check it and see. And if it's too short, well, we'll do it again, and that's easy enough done. The end of the new spring we've just made goes into that tiny little hole in there. Another way to remove slight rust off the hooks and stop rings, etc. It's a piece of 600 grit sandpaper attached to a piece of wood. These wooden abrasive rods, they're what we use in the first stage when we're starting to stone pallets. So how we do this, we just put our finger on it and rub it up and down a little bit, not too much, you don't want to wear any material off. You can see how nice and shiny that comes up. That's the other side after the Dremel. I'll turn that over. We'll run it up there a few times. Doesn't take very much. Gets rid of the slight rust coating that's left on the stop ring. Same, except use 2 fingers this time for the weight hooks. You see it cleans it up relatively well. Alright, there we go. Now we can start to put the movement back together again. We'll start off with the time side. Put the first wheel in first, which goes there. Now we can put the great wheel over the top. It's got him. Second wheel goes there. And the escape wheel goes there. That wheel slides in under there. That's got him. First wheel on the strike side goes there. Great wheel. Warning wheel goes in that hole there. Once I can find it, it does. There we go. And the fly sits there. The other 3 pieces that are left here on our foam block go on the front of the movement, the rack and snail section. In the meantime, we'll put the top plate on. That's got him. Almost. See if we can get that. No, it's not touching. Something is touching and holding it up, and it's not the warning wheel. That one's through. Aha, that's what it'll be, that little guy in there. We'll bring him back a little bit. Once this one drops in, we'll be able to get a couple of nuts on the pillars. I'll put a nut on this pillar down here. Hold the 2 plates together. Only a couple of turns, we don't want too much, so that I can pick it up and have a look to see what's holding. It's better, and nope, still a little bit tight. That great wheel into there. It's looking better, and the top. The plate's still not quite going in, alright. That's right, that's right. Guy there's not touching. Aha, there we go, that's a bit better. I'll put a nut on that, couple of tiny little turns, not very much, so that we can now pick up the movement and have a look and see what we got. That's alright. The first wheel, second wheel goes into a hole in there, and the escape wheel goes into there. Okay, that's got the time side done. I'll put a nut on that. Now we can look at the other side. You don't want it too tight. Time side's running nice and smoothly. Now, back to the strike side, see what we got. That's there. Great wheel. First wheel. Second wheel is to go over there. Almost there, not quite. Very, very close. Down a little bit. There we go, you heard him drop in. Second wheel. Third wheel, the warning wheel. But before we do that, we'll put the fly in. Because the fly on a lot of movements tends to have a slightly longer pivot on them. They're very easily broken off. Now, it's our spring there, that's right. Well, we haven't got, we're not turning there, so something's not right. First wheel. Second wheel. The fly is out of its hole. There we go, that's got it. What do we got? Here we go. Put a nut on the pillar there. Tie it down a bit. A little bit more on the other ones, so that we can have a look and test it. At this stage, we don't want to snap any pivots. Right, let's have a look at the time side. Turning the great wheel. That's looking nice and fluid. Lovely. Now, strike side. Turning the great wheel. Alright, they look alright. No dramas with the pivots, so I'll tighten those 4 nuts down. One was a bit loose. Using our dinky little spanner. Modified, I've cut the centre out of it so that'll make it slightly larger so it fits, and it does fit nicely. Alright, there we go. They're looking okay. Have a look at the other side, make sure everything's right. Right, let's start putting some parts on the other side of the movement now. Start off with the minute wheel down there. Then we'll put the snail on. Pretty much 12 o'clock. Put the rack on now, which fits on that post there. And that has a small C-clip that goes on it, which I think's that one there. See if we can squeeze that on without shooting it around the room somewhere. That went on pretty easily. I think it might have been opened up a bit. We'll tighten that down a little bit. Is that? Yep, it's going to stay there. It's not going to come off. Okay. Now the rack stop lever goes up here, except that I have to take this piece off here first and then mount it in there. And then we have to put this piece on, then push that into that hole over there. Pair of tweezers. There we go. We'll bring that up and over to there in a moment, but in the meantime that's actually a tiny little hole in there. I'll have to find a very fine piece of wire to put in there to hold that on. And then I'll have to work out where that lever there goes, but I'll tighten it down initially and we can look at that once we've got the rest of the parts on. I've got some 28 gauge wire here. I think that might be enough. Push it in through that hole. Then bend it back. We want a little S-shaped piece of wire in there so it doesn't fall out. Move that back with a pair of tweezers. Okay, it's a little bit long. I'll cut a little bit off that. Let's see if I can get into it. So lift one end of that up a bit, the long end. I'll pop the top off that, and then the other end I'll wind around the other side and pick it up with a pair of tweezers, bring it up again, and it's not too bad, but you take a tiny bit off. Right, rack stop lever's been fixed now, so we'll put the washer and the circlip on the minute wheel and hold them in place. I'll use a broader pair of tweezers to put the circlip on. There we go, that's got it. And into that hole there on the back plate. Right, now how are we going to attach this guy so he doesn't come out? You got a hole or a circlip? Nope, it's a piece of wire again. Alright, I'll cut another piece of wire for that. This 28 gauge wire is coming in pretty handy. It's a wire we use for making springs on mechanical clocks. I'll cut this piece off. Don't want too much. Find the hole. Drop him down into there. It's a bit dark, but actually it's very dark, but anyway. I'll put a bit more light on that so I can see what I'm doing. That's got him, and it fell straight through, so I'll bend the top over a bit more. And there's our piece of wire. It's a wire cutting chunks out of my gloves. I'll have to replace them before much longer, I think. Bend that down. Twist that up so that they cross over. Cut both the excess pieces off and then push them down. Right, that'll hold that. See what we got here. Get the minute arbor turning. Yep, I think that just needs some oil to work smoothly. I checked the going side train of this 8-day Cuckoo clock on our test stand and it worked pretty well. So after that it was time to check the strike side and see how that's working. And I found that it wasn't working at all and there was a couple of problems. The rack stop lever seemed to be catching in under here, just above the gathering pallet there, and once the rack stop lever had dropped down under the rack, the striking continued, it didn't stop. So that meant that the pin on the warning wheel here wasn't catching on that piece of the rack stop lever just there. It continued to run and had to be cleaned up. We couldn't use it like that. So I brought the movement back onto the bench. What I've done is I've removed all the parts that aren't necessary to check the rack stop lever. You'll notice there's no pallets and crutch in the movement, and the pendulum leader has been removed. Also the hammer and the 2 bellows lift levers have been removed also. And then over the front I've left on the rack stop lever, the lift lever that lifts on the back of those little lugs on the back of the minute arbor that turn round and activate the rack and snail. They've been left on. So everything else has been removed. A, because they're not necessary, and B, it's a lot easier to see what we're doing if we've got a lot less equipment in the road. I'll put this nut on the minute arbor so we can turn the minute arbor round. It saves putting the hands on, and you'll notice once we do that it's obviously the half hour because the rack stop lever has come up one tooth. So I'll continue to turn that, and then I'll start turning the great wheel down here, and there it goes. It's stopped. So before I do that again, I'll explain what I did. I had to take the rack stop lever off. I had to bend that lug in there, just there, down a tiny little bit, so that the pin on the warning wheel would catch on it. Prior to that, it was just sliding underneath that, and that's why the movement kept striking, because that pin, it wasn't being arrested by that piece on the rack stop lever. Also, I found that the pin on the gathering pallet, just there, was still inside, only just, but still inside one of the teeth on the rack. So it meant that when I turned the hands to the next striking mode, the rack couldn't fall down, it couldn't drop, because it was caught on that pin there on the gathering pallet. So that has now been all adjusted. We can see the gathering pallet turning, the rack moving up every time it's a strike, and then the rack stop lever falls down under the base of the rack here. The pin on the warning wheel has been arrested by that lever there on the rack stop lever, and the pin on the gathering pallet is now away from the teeth on the rack. So that means that that is now working. That took a little bit of working out. The easy part was getting the warning wheel pin to be arrested. The tricky part was realigning the rack stop lever to the same shape, or very close to the same shape it was in when it came out of the factory. And then once we did that, it didn't rub on this side of the plate. And before, this edge here was sometimes dropping down onto that edge of the gathering pallet. So it meant that the strikes would be correct for 2 or 3 or 4 times, and then the next time it'd get caught, so I'd have to reset it, and it would run once or twice again, and then the pin on the warning wheel wasn't being arrested, and the rack stop lever didn't drop in under the rack. Consequently, the movement kept on striking. So that's right now. So what I've got to do now is put the movement all back together again, and then I'll put it up on the test stand, and we'll check it out there. So that's what the problem is. If your cuckoo clock movement keeps running and striking all the time and doesn't stop, that is the problem there. The pin on the warning wheel not being arrested. This other stuff, the bending and twisting, obviously someone wasn't able to get the clock running, so they kept bending things and twisting things until they sort of had a vague facsimile of what it was supposed to be. Then they just put it back in the case and hope that it worked. But in actual fact, it works correctly now. So the rack has been activated. The gathering pallet, you can see it turning, running round, 2 to go, there we go. So the pin is not in between the teeth now. The rack stop lever has fallen to its correct position under the rack, and obviously the pin on the warning wheel has been arrested by that lug there on the rack stop lever. This is the movement on a test stand that I made. I'm running it to test the going side at the moment, and it seems to be working pretty well. So tomorrow I'll get on and check the strike side train. This clip shows the rack stop lever running on because it hasn't been arrested by the pin on the warning wheel. This clip shows the rack stop lever working correctly. We're ready to put the clock movement back into the case now. The last thing we do before we do that, we've got to put the little bird back in his perch. I'll loosen that screw a little bit and slide him onto his perch. Not quite loose enough yet. There we go. Now, I very cleverly put a black texture mark on the black pole, so I'm not sure where he goes, but we'll find out as soon as we get him close to his door. Right, that'll do us for the moment. There's our case. Put the movement back into there. We'll undo the package here that's got all the chains in it so they didn't get tied up or tied into knots. We'll take them out. Still a bit tight. Now we'll sort out which is which. And then we'll put them in through the holes in the bottom of the case. First one, use a pair of tweezers to pull them through. And that's the other half of the stroke side chain. Comes out there. Time side train. First chain. Squeeze it again, helps it through. And the other side of the chain. Out of the road. Drop that down a bit more. Oh, nearly got it anyway. There we go. Right, they're all pull through. Let gravity work for us. They can pull them down. Now very carefully, so we don't hurt the little bird. Bend the movement and drop it into place. Bit of a tight fit there, but we will, in actual fact, manage to get it in there. Alright, well, I'll align that. A screw holding screwdriver as usual. Push it down, get a start. Put it into the first one. I'll tighten that down just a little bit with a proper screwdriver, a regular one. It'll give us a hole there. Now, next one. I think that's... Actually, I'll put it in the one here with the... that had the dentist probe in it. That's got him. Get the next one aligned. Bit hard to see in there. Where's that? And that one up the top. All right. Screw goes into there. It's got it. Loosen the screwdriver. Move the case up a little bit to give us a shade more light, I hope. And then check for the last hole, which appears to be there. Remove the screwdriver. Now, using a longer blade screwdriver to make it easier, we'll tighten up the screws that hold the movement into the case. It's 2, 3, and the 4th one. Now we're going to check to see if the little bird's in the right position. Open the door at the front. And move the perch forward with the little bird on it. Assuming we can get a grip on it. We've got to be careful not to bend that wire that ties the little bird to the door, so the door opens when he sticks his head out, and he's not quite right. Alright, it's got to go over a bit less than ½ an inch. I'll loosen him. and not particularly easy to do in there actually. I'll get that board back. I'll do this off camera, it'll be a lot easier. It's a lot easier if I align the brad first. Now I'll tighten the screw down, then we'll push the brad in further. That'll hold the bellows in the correct position. Got the screw in. Now we want to push the brad in. You might have to hammer it. I thought we might be able to just push it in, but I'll try a light hammer on it. It doesn't particularly want to go in. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any choice. Seems to be a rather long brad, but it's the one that came with it, so I'll get a clamp to put on the pipe to hold it in place so it doesn't move. While we look at sorting out this, I don't think I've got any smaller brads actually to put in. That's seriously a long brad. I don't know why they'd want one quite as long as that in there, but no, it's not going to push. It's going to have to be hammered in. It's a lot easier if you're going to line the brad into the brad hole first. And then put the wire into the lift lever and then screw in the screw. That seems to be the order that works best. Alright, well, get the chains out of the road. There's our movement back in the case. So what we'll do now is we'll put the hands on. We'll go and put it on a test stand, run it there for 3 or 4 days, and make sure it's keeping the correct time and working properly. So we'll put the hands on now. Take these couple of nuts off, put them into our dish so we don't lose them. Get our hands. These horrible looking things were the hands that came with the clock. But obviously they're not original. So we'll put a new set of hands on. Put our hand on first. I don't know what the time is, but we'll call it 3 o'clock and that'll do us for the moment. Now, next nut on. That'll sit down flat, right. Now minute hand. And a knurl nut over the top of that. Not very easy to see when you're all fingers and thumbs. Alright, we don't know what the time is, but I'll put it there initially. Tighten it down a little bit. Right, I'm going to put that on test stand now.